Hebrews chapter 11. What I'm going to do is end one series because chapters 1 through 10 was all about the person and the work of Christ. And so I called that Consider Jesus. But 11 and 12 talk about how to put that knowledge into practice. It's an exhortation to live by faith. Because of who Jesus is, because of what he did for us on the cross, this is how you are to live. And so it really is a whole nother topic, and it is about faith. So it begins in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteousness when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. And by faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And so if you want to find your outline, those are the scripture passages that we're going to be looking at, particularly 1 and 3 and 6 today. So it is the great faith chapter of the New Testament, Hebrews 11. So right off the bat, I want to tell you that I am a person of faith. I have put my faith in Jesus Christ, and I believe that my sins are forgiven and forgotten. It is by faith that I am now living under the reign and the rule of God. It is by faith that I have a relationship with God that is present and will continue forever. I tell others that I belong to the Christian faith and that I am a member of this church, which these days is sometimes called a faith community. So what does it mean to live by faith? And the author of Hebrews is going to help us understand that goal is to live by faith. I don't know about you, but I am one who desires to live by faith. I'm assuming that most of you as well want to live by faith. Interestingly, it is this topic, the topic of faith, that Jesus shared his greatest disappointment to his disciples about their faith. 3 times he said to them, "O you of little faith." You know that statement. It's the most negative thing Jesus ever said to his disciples, besides fear not. In Matthew 8:26, the first occurrence, they are in the boat, Jesus is asleep, a storm comes, and they are afraid for their lives. And so they wake Jesus up and they say, "Don't you care that we're going to capsize and drown?" And Jesus looks at them and says, "O you of little faith." And then he calms the storm. The next instance, again, is in a boat. This time, they are in the boat alone. They have gone on ahead of Jesus. He catches up to them walking on the water. They think it's a ghost. And Peter says, "If it's really you, let me come out." And Peter jumps out of the boat and he starts to walk on the water. He takes his eyes off of Jesus onto the storm and the winds and the waves, and he begins to sink. He cries out, "Lord, save me." Jesus reached down and grabs him, and the first thing Jesus says to him, "O you of little faith," referring to Peter and especially to the men and the boys boat, because they didn't even step out, did they? "O you of little faith." Then the third occasion is when a father comes with a son who is possessed by a demon. And this demon just throws this boy into these kind of epileptic type fits. And so this father comes to the disciples of Jesus and expects that they could be able to cast out the demon and heal him. And they can't. It doesn't work. They pray, they ask, and nothing happens. So they all go and they find Jesus and they say, you know what? We tried to cast out this demon, but he couldn't. And Jesus says to them, and to this father particularly, all things are possible to him who believes. And immediately the boy's father cries out, I do believe. I do have faith, but help me in my unbelief. Do you relate to that? I do, because I can't tell you that I'm a person of perfect faith, that I always live by faith. I think that Jesus is often disappointed in me for my weak faith, and probably you as well. So I too am like that father. Lord, then help me to have the faith that you require me to have. It is the clear expectation in Scripture that the followers of Jesus are to live by faith. The Apostle Paul taught that principle as well. Romans 1:17, for in the gospel a righteousness from God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it's written, the righteous will live by faith. 2 Corinthians 5:7, we live by faith and not by sight. You have that one memorized already. It's not just a statement, it's an expectation. Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I live, but Christ lives in me. In the life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. And then the author of Hebrews echoes that same statement of Paul. My righteous one, those in right relationship with me, will live by faith. So couldn't you use some help, some guidance into how to meet the expectation of Jesus and the Apostle Paul to live by faith? And so we're here in chapter 11, the great faith chapter of the New Testament, to study the topic of faith. He's going to define it for us, and then he's going to give us 21 personal illustrations of people who lived before the time of Christ, who lived by faith successfully. And so let's begin with Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the confidence in what we hope for, the assurance of what we do not see. Most of you have heard that verse. Some of you have memorized it. It is a single definition of faith. It is not an exhaustive definition of faith, but it is his definition of faith. And we need to then discuss right away as what it does not mean, because there are many uses of the word faith, and we need to be clear as to what he doesn't mean when he uses the word faith. First of all, he is not referring to articles or creed of a religion. We call it the Christian religion, the Christian faith. We have the Apostles' Creed is a statement of our faith. We're not talking about doctrines that are lined out as what we believe. We're not referring to faith in that sense. We're not referring to a personal trust in Jesus Christ for salvation. Ephesians 2:8 through 9, right? For by grace are you saved through faith. It is not of yourselves, not of works, lest anyone should boast. So we're not talking about saving faith. That's the only way we are saved, when we put our faith and trust in Jesus, in his person and his work on the cross. We absolutely believe that salvation is by faith alone, but that's not what he means here. He is not referring to a blind leap in the dark where you just live without reason, nor is he referring to a mere attitude of optimism. He's not referring to PMA, positive middle attitudes. He's not referring to wishful thinking. You know, like when you blow out the candles on your birthday, you're supposed to make a wish that something will come true. Or you toss a coin into a fountain pool thinking that something is going to happen because you did that. We're not talking about those kinds of expressions of faith. So what does he mean here in our verse? Let's go back to it. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Here, confidence and assurance are synonymous terms, and this sentence is repetitive. It says something and then it repeats it in another way. Sometimes this verse is translated, and that's the way I memorize it, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Now, this would mean if faith is a substance, that means it's some kind of objective support or some type of, some people say, title deed that helps you out. But the vast majority of Bible scholars, and I must have read 10 of them this week, interpret the words as it is translated in the NIV. That faith is confidence. It is a subjective, personal feeling in the depth of your soul. It is having an inner certainty in God who is unseen. Faith in this chapter by the author of Hebrews is possessing in your mind and in your heart, your soul, an undivided confidence in God. So if you want to write that in, faith is first of all confidence in God. Now faith must have an object, and the object of biblical faith is God who has revealed himself in Jesus Christ. He is the only worthy object of our faith. Verse 6, I jump all the way to verse 6. Anyone who comes to God must believe, that is, have faith, that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So faith is this firm conviction that God exists, that God is at work and will come through to us and for us on our behalf. It's like my little twin grandsons. They are yet to be 2 in another month or so, but they love to jump on the sofa into their father's arms. It is that kind of confidence that they can just leap knowing that their father is there and that he will catch them every single time. And so they just with total abandon leap off of the sofa because he is there waiting for them. Now they can see him, but we cannot see God. Faith is our assurance that God is there, that he cares, and that he will intervene in our lives for our good. So faith is first of all confidence in God. What else is it? Faith is the assurance of what we do not see. Faith is being sure of things unseen in the future. Faith is having the assurance that what we hope for, what we cannot now see, are really there. We can't see them, but we believe that they are real. And once we have faith, it will enable us to press on into our daily lives, into an unknown future, because we believe that God is going to provide for us in that way. Here's a drawing that I put together that will hopefully help you understand what is being said here. Faith is first of all where? In the object of God. That is who we put our faith in as he has revealed himself in Jesus Christ. Hope is looking out horizontally into our future. It is unseen and believing that God will in fact provide for us. And what we have here is this incredible mix by the author that he uses faith and hope to define one another. It's like you buy epoxy, right? And there's two parts, right? There's the epoxy and then there's the hardener. And it's no good unless you mix them together. And what good is hope? Hope without faith is simply wishful thinking. But here, faith and hope come together and make this incredibly strong part that we must have spiritually to survive. Faith and hope go together. So, for example, think about some binoculars. Say one day you're at the foot of a mountain and you're going to take these binoculars and you're going to look up to the top of the peak. In that same way, with the eyes of faith, you're looking to God. He is the object of your faith. But then again, you're going to take those binoculars and then you're going to look out horizontally and look as far to the horizon as you can. Now, you're going to see things that are far beyond the powers of your binoculars. But you're going to believe that that's reality out there. I can't see it clearly. It goes on and on. But if I were to get in my car and drive, I would see that there is reality out there. So to summarize, faith is looking at God, trusting Him for everything, and hope is looking at the future and trusting God to bring it to pass. Now, many of you and I, we go to restaurants now and then to eat a meal. We're going to go and sit down at a sit-down restaurant. It's not a drive-through, but we could do it that way too. Now, when you come to a restaurant and you sit down and you get a menu, you are acting in faith. You are believing that a cook exists somewhere on the premises, right? How many of you go into a restaurant and ask to meet the cook first before you sit down with the menu? Anybody do that? Not one person. See, we're all believing in something that we don't see. We don't see the cook, but we believe he or she is there. So we sit down, we look at the menu, and in faith we place an order. We don't see the cook, but we believe the cook is there. And then we hope. We hope that our food will come and that it will be good. So in every act, that is the same kind of faith. We are believing that God is there even though we cannot see Him. And we are hoping that He will provide for us what is good. Faith and hope go together. They convince us that things we do not see, like God, are real. So are you living by faith? Do you believe that God exists? Do you inspire others to do the same? Do you live in complete confidence of God's ability to overcome obstacles? You just see the walls. You just see the bumps. Can you see beyond that God can take care and make the way? Do you demonstrate an attitude of trust in God's care and His promises? Are you ready to leap off the sofa into His arms because you know He's there? He's going to care for you, never drop you. Do you advance the cause of Christ because you go forward when others will not? If that's you, we need you on the diaconate like next week, okay? The church board needs to have people like this on the board because they need to be able to see what everybody else doesn't see and move forward. And are you one who asks God for what is needed and trusts Him for His provision? This is what it begins to look like when you are living by faith. So we're going to skip down to verse 3 now because he then takes his definition of faith and gives his congregation an example that is going to test their faith. And here it is. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So he says, you want to see if you have faith? Think about the origin of the universe. It too is something that you cannot see. Because according to the creation story, Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, there was only God. There was nothing else. There was no human present because we weren't created yet. There were no eyewitnesses. Job 38:4 says, when he began to question God, God says, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely, Job, you know." And Job is speechless because you know what? Nobody was there. There is no human eyewitness account of the Creator creating. It is an unseen event in the past that we believe in only by faith. He wants us to go a step further. He wants to put home the point that God created the material universe, that is the earth, and everything else that we see, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the galaxies, without any material building blocks. That God didn't use protons or electrons or neutrons to create matter. There was nothing. Nothing visible, nothing invisible. God spoke, He commanded, and all of a sudden time and space and matter came into being. It's called ex nihilo. God created out of nothing. Out of nothing. That God spoke, and time and space and matter was formed. Material came into existence. Psalms 33:6 tells us exactly that. By the word, and the word only of the Lord, the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of His mouth. For He spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. This creationism is a doctrine that we believe only by faith because we cannot see it. It's in the past. It is unseeable. What can we see? We can see Romans 1:18 that says that the creation declares the glory of God. You see the handiwork. You see the fingerprints of God in creation. Just go out and look. And look at a flower. Look at the sky. Look at all that you see. And you will come to a conclusion that, yes, there has to be a creator. There has to be an intelligent designer behind this design. We can see that without faith because the creation declares the glory of God, His existence. But we cannot see that creator creating. That takes faith. And that's what he is saying. Now, modern science, for the most part, refuses to accept the creation account because it takes faith. And they don't believe in faith. They just believe in science. And so they teach evolution to you and to our children. And in doing so, they reject God and the powers of His Word. But we as Christians, we unswervingly maintain faith in the creation story, and we teach it as it is given to us in the beginning of Genesis chapter 1. So, do you have faith? Test it by whether or not you have full confidence and assurance that God created the universe out of nothing. He just throws that in there. Think you have faith? Then what do you believe about the origin of the universe? Then I jump down to verse 6. Faith valued. It's valued by God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. And verse 2, this kind of faith, this faith that pleases God is what the ancients were commended for. Commendations. I have not been in the military, but I know the military is really big on giving out letters of commendation, medals that indicate that this person did something over and above the call of duty. So the ancients are who? the same people he mentioned in Hebrews 1:1, our forefathers, the forefathers of the Jewish religion, Abraham, Moses, Noah, and he's going to list several of those folks in the chapter that we'll see here, and they are the ones who were commended for having this faith. Faith, even before Christ came, people had what pleased God. God highly values this, not because it's a virtue or an attribute, but because it is a way of life. These men, these women lived a life of faith. He says, without faith, it is impossible, and that's a very strong word, it is impossible to please God. So there is no substitute. We must have it. It is indispensable as an ingredient for pleasing God. Speaking of ingredients, last Easter afternoon, we had my family over, as I indicated. Lots of people were there, and one of our relatives brought a pound cake. And we were sitting out on the back porch. It was a beautiful day, and we were eating pound cake, and the conversation came up as to why is this called pound cake? And the reason is because there's a pound of butter in it. Okay. In other words, you cannot have pound cake without a pound of butter. It is an essential ingredient. It may be some other kind of cake, but it's not a pound cake unless it has a pound of butter. Faith is like that. We cannot please God without it. We must have it. We must have it. So, what is this faith that pleases God? One, it believes that God is there. He who comes to God must believe that he exists. Now, again, surveys show us again and again that 90% or more of Americans will always answer yes to that question. Do you believe God exists? Oh, yes, absolutely. This is, for the most part, an intellectual belief. It's the same belief the demons have, because James 2:19 says the demons believe that God exists. It's an intellectual belief. They don't really want to follow him or submit to his authority. No, but they believe he exists. So God is this basic belief in God is absolutely certain that we have an unswerving confidence in his presence, even though we can't see him, and in his concern, even though we may not always feel that love and concern. So we have to believe in God's existence. Secondly, that we need to approach God, unlike the demons, with an attitude of total dependence and open availability. So it's not just, I intellectually believe in God. No, I really believe in God. I am going to trust my life to him. I'm going to believe that he's going to care for me, and I'm completely surrendering to his guidance in my life. And then thirdly, I'm going to trust him to keep his word and his promises. He says that he is the rewarder of them that seek him. Our God is a God who rewards people. It's not that these rewards can be earned. No, it's because God chooses to bless his people. They are free expressions of his moral character. He's not going to punish us in that sense. He's going to reward those who diligently seek him, because he is a God of grace. He's a God of love. He's a God of forgiveness. And so he rewards his people. So these are the three elements of faith that enable us to please God. So just to finish then, biblical faith is someone who believes in God, who acts on God's promises with confidence and unwavering belief in God's ability to fulfill his purposes both now and in the future. Again, he's your focus first, and then you're focusing on your future that you cannot see. So I challenge you, what situations might you be facing that are going to call for this kind of a faith? It's going to really call you to believe in God that you can't see. It's going to really call you to believe in the future you cannot see. I'm trusting God through this whole church assessment process. We're not doing this church assessment process for the fun of it. We're doing this church assessment process because we're in trouble. You know, attendance has been on the decline all last year. I've already lost 4 seniors by death this year. These are troubling facts to me. So our culture is changing fast. So I need to figure out something quick about how this church continue its mission here in the world. So this is a faith thing for me, a big faith thing for me. So I'm going to believe God now that this whole assessment will in fact be good for us, be good for you as a church, be good for me as a pastor. Believe me, my faith is on the line because this is scaring the willies out of me, okay? But I'm going to choose to believe that God cares about me and this church and will use this for our good and for our community as well. That's just my personal example of the 2 questions that I'm posing to you. What situations are you facing that you are being tested to believe God? God, if you don't show up, I'm in real trouble. And I'm going to believe that you will show up and that it will be for my good. Let us pray. Thank you again, Lord, for these simple verses, and yet harder to interpret and harder to apply than we can imagine. But here it is. We've done our best today to understand what the author of Hebrews said faith is and what it is required and how you require it of us. And so, Lord, as we walk through our week, help us to be alert to the fact when we are being challenged to have this kind of faith, to really believe you're there and to really believe that you're going to take care of what we cannot now see and that it will be for our good. In Christ's name.